Welcome to Liner Notes. My name is David Bixler. Heads up that due to COVID-19, this interview was recorded remotely. It might not be the same quality as if recorded in a studio. Multi-instrumentalist Lou Marini has been a mainstay in American popular music for decades. Woody Herman, Blood, Sweat and Tears, SNL, the Blues Brothers, and James Taylor are just a few of the iconic names that grace his resume. Throughout his time with these high-profile groups, Lou has remained an artist dedicated to his craft. When his touring schedule was erased because of the pandemic, he turned his attention to composing music for a large ensemble that will soon be recorded. In this episode of Liner Notes, Lou talks extensively about his new music as well as passionately sharing his thoughts on the current political climate. Lou Marini, thank you so much for joining us today. I know you're super busy, so really appreciate you taking the time to speak with us about music, life, and your career. So welcome, man.
Thank you.
Yeah. First thing that I've been asking everyone during the last couple of years, yourself as a musician, what have you been doing? Without gigs are starting to finally open up, but like, how has Lou Marini been occupying himself and not going nuts and keeping the artistic juices flowing?
Well, for one thing, my wife teaches at the United Nations School, and she had applied for a sabbatical. And when the pandemic hit, I was just about to leave to go on tour with James, and she had found out that she had gotten a sabbatical. So the James Taylor tour was canceled and the summer tour was canceled very shortly after that. And I found myself at home instead of being in Europe, instead of being on tour with James. I was really basically booked from March till mid-September, and then all of that was gone. But she also got this sabbatical, so she had to teach online for from March until June, mid-June, when school was out. And then then we had the whole sabbatical year together, and we had planned on doing a lot of traveling and being in Europe, and because she's Spanish, we have an apartment in Madrid, and all of that was went out the window also. But we were together in New York. And, you would go for walks in the evening after dinner, walk on West End Avenue, and there's all these 15, 16-story buildings, and there wouldn't be a light on in the building. Everybody left town. We had New York to ourselves, basically. And, we say sometimes jokingly, we don't want to say this aloud, but we actually had a great time during the pandemic. We were together. We cooked something like 400 consecutive meals together, and I was personally really productive because I had written the chart that you're playing, Clong, that right before the pandemic, and then I think I mentioned in the clinic also that I had realized there was a chart on my piano that I had started like 25 years ago and gotten halfway through and didn't finish it, And it was inspired by Jorge Borges' book, The Book of Imaginary Beings, which is a sort of catalog of real imaginary beings in literature or in folklore, and also some ones that he just made up. It's a beautiful book. And there's one called the Abao-Ku. And the Abao-Ku rests at the bottom of this stone staircase that leads to the top of a mountain that's a real pilgrimage, and only the purest pilgrim can make it to the top. And the Abao-Ku comes to life as it accompanies the true pilgrim to the top, and only at the top does it come to its full bloom, luminescent self. It's very short though. It's just a 2-paragraph description of the life of this thing. But that had inspired this chart, and I got halfway through. I got to the top, and I knew how I wanted to end it, but I couldn't figure it out. It was like a harmonic problem, and it defeated me for during the time that I was really writing the chart all those years ago. I just couldn't figure out the ending. And then it lay there dormant for all those years. And I saw that on my piano cleaning out stuff, and I said, I got to finish this thing. So I found a sketch that I had solved one phrase, and it's a repetitive phrase. It's just two phrases. It's this ba da da ba dee da ba dee da da dee da da dee da da dee da da dee da da. But it's a descending chord sequence underneath, and so it makes this nice cycle. And so I wanted to harmonize it through the whole sequence of chords, and I couldn't figure it out. But I found this one example, and I played it, and all of a sudden, within a couple hours, I got the other 6 of them, or the other 5 down. And that started me. And since then, I've written a dozen new big band charts. And it's been cool because I've had the kind of inspiration and excitement that I had when I was first writing big band charts down in North Texas. That kind of absorption where you start working on something at 10 o'clock and suddenly you look up and it's 3:30 and you haven't eaten anything, and that kind of concentration, which is really pleasurable, and that mental stimulation of the problem solving. And the funny thing about writing too is how a simple, clear idea in your head, writing it out longhand and just deciding the specific orchestration and the hearing in your head and the imagining and the checking on the piano, and one simple little idea can be hours before it's down before 1 page or 2 pages is down.
Like 2 decades in this case.
Yeah, more.
You had alluded a little bit to your process, but maybe you can elaborate, on that. Sounds like you're using the piano. Are you orchestrating at the same time that you're arranging, that you're composing?
What I do is, it's not always the same. In fact, because I didn't have an interest in like copying I never thought of myself as an arranger, really. I've done a lot of arranging, but it's always been in more inventive situations where it's not totally true, because sometimes, like I discovered something the other day. I had gone out to, well, this is actually like the way music works. I had a student right before I left North Texas. His real name was Gary Muck. He was a tenor saxophone player from South Dakota, I think. And I seriously thought that I should tell the guy to get out of music, because he just wasn't a very good saxophone player.
Gary, apologies if you're listening.
Yeah, well, he's in the clouds at this point. So Gary, his career path was that he left school and he started working as a salesman for some kind of music publisher, and he did all this stuff, and then he realized that. And meantime, he's working on composition, and like he studied with Wes Hensel out in California. He told me that his first lesson with Wes Hensel in Las Vegas. Wes Hensel, the trumpet player, big band trumpet player, who I was on the faculty of the National Stage Band camps with and loved the guy. He was a beautiful guy. So Wes was a great arranger. And so Gary said that Gary had changed his name to Gary Michaels. He had been a salesman for music, and then he settled in Las Vegas, and he sort of apprenticed himself and started studying with Wes. And he said his first lesson with Wes was at 1 o'clock in the morning after the show. He knocked on Wes's door, and he says, Wes opened the door. He was wearing a T-shirt and boxer shorts. And Gary says, hi, Gary. Hi, Wes. I'm Gary Michaels. And Wes says, okay, for your first assignment, write 404-bar phrases. That'll be $50. And he took the $50 and shut the door, and Gary left. So then Gary told him, when he told me this story, Gary says, did you ever try to write 404-bar phrases? And the funny thing is that 20 years after that, after Gary was in school in like 1969 or 70 when I left, maybe 30 years later, like in 1990, around then, I get a call from Gary. Would you like to, I'll pay you $10,000 to come out and write this series of jingles for my newest campaign. Gary had created a jingle company that specialized in, for instance, used car dealers or funeral homes. So he would get the best guys in LA, get a good writer, write a whole jingle program for used cars, and it was Your Name Here. Everything but the name of the used car dealership was in the jingle. So then the singers just had to come in, and then the salesman went around and said, here's the product. You can have your local commercial sound like this in Boise, Idaho, or Steubenville, Ohio. And so Gary just made a ton of money, man. And he was a good arranger himself and a really good lyricist. His ideas, you know, they were the kind of thing that are so obvious that you don't think of them. It takes a guy like him to think of them. Just like a natural phrase that you would say that turns out to be the key phrase in getting a great commercial message across. So I end up with the guy that I thought I should tell him to get out of music. He's paying me good bread to come out and work for him. And it was, you know, that's an eye-opening experience but we were talking about the process, and I discovered this CD that I had done for him that was totally in the style of like a West Coast horn section in that genre. And I had totally forgotten about it. And when I listened to it, because at first I just found this CD, you know, I put the CD on, and here's just the horn tracks. And I'm thinking to myself, what the hell is this, you know? And then I realized once the track, then the second thing with the horns added to the rhythm track, oh, this is that jingle thing I did for Gary. I totally forgot about it. So I am capable of arranging, is my point. But that's not where my head lies. And what I usually do is once I get an idea, like if it's a tune or if it's a fragment of something that I think I might expand, then both in longhand, I write out ideas about structure, or this would be good if the saxophones had an abstract sort of soli, or just any kind of thing that might occur to me that I might want to put in the chart, or ideas about it as I sing it in my head to myself. I write them down in longhand. And then I also write tons of specific musical ideas, which as I begin to write, I mostly discard. And the central ideas that seem the most promising or prominent or call to me the most, they become the cardinal aspects of the arrangement. And then I'm always thinking about, like, this thing, Condition Blue. You know, it's a melody that goes, I mean, a bass line that goes. Well, you know, there's all kinds of sequences that are built right into it. And once I started writing it for the wind ensemble, you know, obviously a wind ensemble piece, I wanted to be long, but I try to make everything in the piece relate to the original melodies and the theme, and so take fragments of it, work them. But my process is different for every chart. You know, I was there's a wonderful young piano player in New York who's got a great big band album out of his compositions and arrangements. His name is Stephen Feifke. He was playing with Steve Tyrell last year, or 2 years ago, at the Carlisle, and I played that gig for a month and got to know him and really love the kid. He's beautiful, you know. And I was telling him about, because we were talking about composition, And, you know, some things are like purely abstract. I had an idea for, I was reading about the different theories about the Big Bang, you know, and I've subscribed to Scientific American for most of my adult life. I don't understand three-fourths of it, I imagine, but it makes me think, you know, and so I was thinking about, I just played this row on the on the piano, but it's an unusual row because it's just an all ascending row. So it starts like on a low F sharp and ends up on a high A or something, I forget. And there was something about the sound of it. I kept just repeating it, you know, and playing it on the piano and listening to it. And then I got this idea about the Big Bang, and I played all 12 notes at once, using GarageBand just so I could hear it, you know. And then I thought, okay, a big band, piccolo on the top, bass trombone, or piano or bass trombone playing the lowest note, because I thought the piano will play the row slowly, and that's the cosmic background radiation noise. That continues through the whole piece. It never stops. It's just quietly going on the whole time. But the piece starts with the whole band super loud playing this 12-note voicing, and then for 8 beats. And then everybody on the bottom jumps up a major seventh, and everybody in the top jumps down a major seventh for 7 beats. And then everybody goes the reverse for a minor seventh for 7 beats. Everybody goes the reverse for 6 beats, a major sixth, reverse 6 beats, a minor sixth, fifth, tritone, 4.5 beats, till they end up on the same chord, but transposed. And the thing is that because it's parallel movement, the value of the chord stays the same, even in spite of all these big jumps. And it's just out, you know. And then I wrote, based on clusters from the row, I wrote something for the trombones, something for the trumpets, something for the woodwinds in different times, cued by me, so that they can happen while bass, drums, bass clarinet, and electric guitar are playing free. And then I cue these little events, and they're in different, they're not tonally centered or anything, and they're all in different times. The woodwind one is very slow and serene in 3/4. The bass trombone one is the trombone one is in 4/4, like a funk kind of vibe, and the trumpets are something else. So I can cue those as I wish, or cue them out while these guys are freely playing. Then the row starts again from the place it ended, and follows the same pattern of jumping. And when the row ends that time, every guy in the band has the tone roll starting on where his note ended up, where he ends up in the row. So everyone starts on a different note and goes through playing the row, and their instructions are to play it, and each time you play the row, play shorter and shorter notes with more and more distance between them, softer and softer. So it's like entropy. It's like the stars winking out. And the effect of it is super cool, man. And when it ends up, the piece ends, and because gradually, all through all of this, you don't hear that. You just hear little bits of that piano part playing the background cosmic radiation thing. But at the end, that's what you hear. You hear that piano. And then he just stops on the top note, you know. And that was, you know, the only thing I basically composed were the interludes. Everything else is just sort of a mathematical idea. So my point is that for me, every composition is its own sort of adventure, and brings its own process to itself, you know.
Well, I wanted to ask you about that amazing idea. Was what you had theorized and put on paper? How did it manifest itself when you heard it for the first time? Was it what you expected? Was it different? Was it better? Was it worse? Were there things you wanted to change?
Actually, I was surprised by it because the the funny thing is with the leaps, and you would think that going a whole major seventh away, it would be a strikingly different sound, but the quality of the harmonic tension basically stays the same because everybody is moving in parallel. So it's it's it didn't sound like, and I recorded it on the computer so I could hear the way it sounded. But with live instruments, it was strikingly different, and the guys were all like, they were. I explained to them my idea about it, and what I was intending to represent. But yeah, it surprised me in some ways about the way it sounded, and the guys had trouble initially with hearing the way I heard the ending of, they were doing it too fast, and they ended up the row too fast. It's got to really sort of stretch out, and even at that though, it's not that long. The piece is only like seven minutes or something like that, But yeah, that's probably the most abstract thing I've written for big band.
So you did a record a number of years ago, big band record, and from what you're telling me, you're about to do another one with
with all these new pieces.
Yeah. When's that happening? Is there a plan?
Well, there's sort of a plan. I mean, I really want to play live first, and all the guys I got a great band, man. Buddy Williams playing drums, and this wonderful young guitar player named Near Felder plays his ass off, and Kenny Asher, a great piano player, playing, and Tom Barney playing bass, Bob Milliken, one of the classic New York lead trumpet players, Chris Rogers, Barry Rogers' son, playing jazz, and some young saxophone players. There's a tenor player named Sam Dillon, just plays his ass off, and a young alto player with brilliant young player named Andrew Gold, and Lawrence Feldman is playing lead, Matt Hong playing tenor, and Dave Rickenberg playing baritone saxophone. So I got a really great band, and the guys are like super enthusiastic. And I've been bringing charts in. I mean, almost every time we rehearse, I bring new charts. And so everybody's burning to play. I just have to, at the end of the pandemic with all this stuff that's happening, I have to find a place that'll support a big band. And also, it's like the Kenton style or North Texas style with 10 brass instead of 8. So that even makes it more difficult to find a place to play. But I want to play a few gigs first, and then my idea is to go out to a studio in Hackensack called Iwi. No, it's not Hackensack. It's right across the river. There's a ferry that goes right to, what the hell's the name of the town? But the studio is called Iwi, and it's it used to be a place where they ran rail cars in and washed them. So it's a big, high-ceiling room, and it's a great sounding room. We recorded the last Blues Brothers CD in there. And I want to mic it the old way and play live with no headphones.
Bold move. That's great.
I love live playing, and live CDs. I just prefer them. Not that I don't have tons of favorite CDs that were done in the studio, but there's something about when guys are playing live.
The humanity, man.
Yeah, it's
the energy.
It's just the best,
Yeah, for sure. When you had said pre-pandemic you were scheduled to be on the road with James Taylor from March basically to the fall. Do you have a routine? Like, are you still writing during this time, or was this kind of a respite, like this, the bright side of not working?
Well, with James, I do have a routine, and because normally I'm playing a lot of instruments. So when the guys, we always do a sound check at 4 o'clock every afternoon. And then guys, everybody goes to dinner, you know. Well, when everybody goes to dinner, I go practice because you know, otherwise you're driving everybody nuts. And what I want to do is, you know, what I'm doing basically is making sure that all the reeds are feeling good. So I play like a half hour, 40 minutes of flute, and then another half hour, 40 minutes of playing through the different saxophones just to make sure everything is. And you know, I know that I'm also noodling all the fucking time. You know, so I get off stage and go over in the corner and play, and you know, as I was telling the kids in the clinic, I basically at this point I'm always working at stuff that somehow I intend to incorporate into my jazz playing. So, and it's surprising the way that works because it never comes in the way you think it would. But and it's also a mystery to me still about how long it takes before something is subsumed into your subconscious that will emerge in your playing in the way that you are clearly hearing something, you know. That is a mystery still.
Yeah, definitely. You know, we've talked about the pandemic, and I want to bring it around to the last couple of years. We've also, you know, witnessed crazy political time and, you know, racial unrest, you know, to get kind of sparked by the murder of George Floyd. And we had spoken a little bit about this before, and, you know, as a musician that has, you know, been immersed in, you know, music that's coming from Black culture, like any thoughts, you know, like anything that you want to communicate to a young person about this music, about what we're going through, about the reality of where this music came from?
I was talking about this with I have a gentleman farmer friend who's a Wall Street guy who's makes hay up in Pauling, New York, and sells them to a super rich guy who has like a dozen Mercedes dealerships that has a specific kind of Peruvian walking horse that he breeds. And my friend sells all of his hay to, he's a beautiful cat, a Vietnam vet, and you know, a guy who's been there. And he loves music, and he puts together a band of good New York musicians and books gigs for the band. And his joy is to come up and sit on a harmonica on one tune, but other than that, that's all he does, you know. Beautiful cat named Stephen Ewing. And we were talking about it, and I was saying that you know, from the time I was a kid, being around Black musicians, I've never felt a shred of any reverse racial stuff put on me. And I got to know, be very close friends with Bob Cranshaw, for instance, and also nowhere near as close, but a friend of Frank West's and of Snooky Young and that Joe Wilder and that era of musicians were so elegant, man. Clark Terry, all those guys were, you know, like I worked a lot with Thad Jones and Mel Lewis. You know, I was a steady sub in that band through the 70s. And, you know, those guys, they put it in a different place. And they had to have experienced and continue to experience through their lives this racial sin that our country is part of, which sometimes I feel like maybe is just too profound to ever get over. Because, you know, like the reaction to Black Lives Matter. Well, you think about the insurrection. The first thing that struck me when I saw all those people on the White House, beside the astonishment that it was actually happening, was, man, if that was Black people, they would have shot those people down in a fucking second. there would have been no hesitation of using firearms. I'm telling you, I truly believe that. And I think, you know, I heard the same reaction, like from a lot of my friends, that we all thought the same thing. And I just, I don't know. It's like sometimes I think our original sin is so deeply ingrained and so. I'm astonished sometimes by the hatred that you see in white people. You know, it's really disheartening, and you know, I think there's been a concerted effort to dumb down our country by like the Koch brothers and these right-wing organizations that want to defund schools or and you know, you read about the effects of education on young people. First of all, the effects of not how we're sort of a tabula rasa in the beginning, and if a kid isn't talked to a lot, if a kid isn't held and caressed a lot, and by the time he starts elementary school, he's already messed up. Well, then if you're in a poor school, like our it offends me how politicians are always talking about their children as some sacred thing. Our children, you know, we have to do this for our children. Meanwhile, they don't want to invest any money in our children, especially if our children happen to be of another color or from the wrong side of the tracks. Where the money ought to go is to the kids who have the least opportunity. And the product of all this poor education and I mean, Jesus, it's sometimes I think we're just profoundly fucked, you know. And on that note,
yeah.
what this reminds me of, you know, like when you think about, like for instance, during the Iraq War, I remember on the nightly news one night, they make this announcement that there was a video clip of some Marines bursting into a house in like Fallujah or somewhere where they're fighting heavily, and they come upon some Iraqis, and it's a wounded guy in the corner, and he shoots him, you know, and they make this announcement that say this, it may be disturbing to watch. We have to warn you that this may be disturbing to watch. And then they show the guy, and then you hear the Marines say, I guess that he says something where he obviously says motherfucker, you know, and they bleep that out. And I thought to myself, this is how screwed up we are. You can show somebody killing somebody, but they can't hear somebody cursing. That's insane to me, man. It's just insane, you know. It makes no sense. It's just crazy. And there's a element of our country that's twisted in that way that it's just ass backwards, you know. I start talking about this and I get hot, man.
Well, I think that's good, and you know, I want to throw that back at you. In your saying that you think it's too far gone, like the sin is too great, but I think this passion that you feel and that a lot of people feel, I just don't think we're gonna go there, or you know, if we do go there, it's not gonna be easy. You know, I mean, at least 50% of the people feel in the direction that you do. And you know, I can only be hopeful that.
Well, I'm hopeful too,
Yeah.
but boy, sometimes, I mean, this Trump era has been, wow, what a dark, just in so many ways. The fact that a guy can be elected president when he makes on TV makes fun of a handicapped person. That alone just astonishes me, man. I can't get my head around that. How anybody could vote for somebody who did that, who is so low. You know, it's astounding. And then the other thing is the pandering to this anti-intellectual. You know, I remember when Sarah Palin was running for office, and people were saying, "I like her because she's just like me." And my response was, "Your kid is riding his bicycle down the street. He gets hit by a car, and he has severely injured, and you rush him to the hospital, and he's going into surgery. Do you want the surgeon to be somebody just like you, or do you want the surgeon to be somebody fucking great? Somebody who's worked his ass off to learn what he's doing, you know?" Ah, drives me crazy. And you know, the thing is that so many of these people who are anti-intellectual in their own work, like if you're a guy whose job is taking off the tires at the bus station, there's still an element of skill in that. So don't you aspire to be the best guy at taking off the bus tire? Because, man, if you take it off wrong, you can kill yourself. They can fire off, and it's a big thing, you know? I mean, it's just, there's parts of this that I find so offensive and so stupid, you know? It's just, wow, man. Lack of respect and cloaked in religion, you know?
Definitely is some of that, man, for sure. Lou.
Let's get back to music, man. I got to lower my blood pressure here.
No, I think we're cool. Lou, thank you so much for your time and your words and for your music, man. Appreciate spending time with you. For
Thanks,
sure, man.
Bix.
All right. Peace out. Liner Notes is grateful for the support of Van Doren Reeds and Mouthpieces. Be sure and check out the Van Doren Advisory Studio in New York City for all your sound sculpting needs. Liner Notes is grateful for the support of Ireland's Good Beer in Bowling Green, Ohio. Sound by Marco Mendoza. The theme music is No FOMO, Mofo by yours truly. Produced by David Bixler. Be sure and subscribe to Liner Notes wherever you find your podcasts. If you like what you hear, I ask that you consider supporting Liner Notes financially. You can do this by going to the Liner Notes tab at davidbixler.com. Thank you for your consideration.